Okay. I've been trying to do this for a while. Uh, there's been speculation about whether this is a normal flu or the numbers are being overblown. And it doesn't matter how much evidence to the contrary that you bring out. The amateurs try to guess the CDC numbers and saying that the stuff is overblown and they're padding the numbers with other deaths. All of which nobody can actually prove. We have to take the numbers that are given to us. But there's one factor that, to me, if it's accurate, proves that this is not a normal situation. And that is the number of deaths total that's above normal. And I peeped this with Chris Mortensen at Peak Prosperity when I actually posted this. And it was actually talking about the UK. About the excess deaths. And now the New York Times has actually posted this. This comes from the Upshot, but this is New York Times actually talking about New York City deaths reach 6 times the normal level, far more than coronavirus count suggests. In fact, I've been saying that New York City has been undercounting the amount of people that have died from coronavirus because they haven't been tested or confirmed. And a lot of folks that are contrary say this is bullshit. But the evidence when it comes in actually is not. People think that these stats are supposed to come in like instantly, and they're not. CDC has to verify all this stuff, and it takes a while. Normally you wouldn't get this till like the end of the year. But since this is an ongoing thing, people think this is supposed to be counted like instantly, like it's supposed to be like internet time, like an app on their phone is supposed to tell when they die and also tell them what they die for. And it's not that way. Plus, the coroner doesn't have enough time to actually do all the verification because so many people are dead. Anyway, this is by Josh Katz and Margot Sanger Katz. More than 27,000 New Yorkers have died since the start of the novel coronavirus outbreak in March. 20,900, almost 21,000 people, more than would be expected over this period, and thousands more than have been captured by official coronavirus statistics. And this is New York City deaths by week, observed and expected. Now, this should be obvious. This is the normal pattern. This goes back 2 years, I think. Yeah, 3 years. Over 3 years, they tracked the weekly deaths. And over 3 years, they've tracked the weekly deaths. Over the 3 years, this is the high. This is that 2018 was an abnormal year for deaths, right? It's the high. And normally at the beginning of the year, as you would expect with flu and cold weather, you would get more deaths, right? During January, right? And we track just fine till we get to there. Now, that should be obvious. The average amount of deaths is right around maybe 1,000, maybe a little bit over per week, right? Which is, in a big city, that's what you expect. There's no way that this can be an accident. There's no way that you can even think on any platform that that's normal. There's no way that you can have 6,000 deaths per week. 6 times the normal rate. Look at that. Normally, you could, if anything else, you could say that, well, maybe it's an abnormal year, you had a bad year. That's not a bad year. That's not a bad year. That is an epidemic. As of Sunday, the city had attributed 16,670 deaths to coronavirus, either because people had tested positive for the virus or because the circumstances of the deaths meant that the city health official believed the virus to be the most likely cause of death. But there remains a large gap between this number and the total deaths above the typical levels in the last 6.5 weeks. More than 4,200 people whose deaths are not captured by the official coronavirus toll. The recent death count reached 6 times the normal number of deaths for the city at this time of year, a surge in deaths much larger than what could be attributed to normal seasonal variations from influenza, heart disease, or more common causes. The city's largest mass casualty event in recent memory, the terrorist attack of September 11, 2001, claimed over only a fraction as many lives. It is too soon to know the precise causes of death for New Yorkers in this period, although many of the deaths not currently attributed to coronavirus may represent an undercount of the outbreak's direct toll. The broader effects of the pandemic might have also increased deaths indirectly. Throughout the city, emergency rooms have been overcrowded, ambulance response has been slowed, and many residents might have been reluctant to seek medical care because of fears of contracting the virus. Hospitals around the country have reported reductions in admission for heart attacks, one sign that people may be dying at home from ailments they would survive during more normal times. They're actually allowing for that. This is another chart showing the spike in deaths. The measurements in our chart rely on a New York Times analysis of mortality data from the city's Department of Health and for the National Centers for Health Statistics and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. They capture the number of New York City residents who have died each week since January 2017. So it's actually two different sources: City Department of Health and for the National Center for Disease Control. They capture the number of New York City residents who have died each week since January 2017. The total number of deaths for the period from March 11th through April 25th comes from the City Health Department. The way in which these deaths are distributed by week is an approximation based on how mortality data has lagged in the past. Even with these high totals, the recent numbers in our charts are the most likely undercount of all deaths in the city. In normal times, death certificates take time to be processed and collected, and complete death tallies can take weeks to become final. But even if the current count is perfect, roughly 27,600 New Yorkers have died of all causes since the beginning of the epidemic. That's about 20,000 more than is typical. In other words, this is abnormal. It's the same thing that Chris Morton was saying about the UK and the number of deaths expected per week. So the doctors and all the other folks saying that this is normal, and the doctor sitting down at a table and he's speaking, he's not showing his facts, or he doesn't have a board, it doesn't mean anything. You know, if he's got numbers, he should prove it. He should sit down just like everybody else and prove it. He's got a laptop. He's got the same equipment that we have. So there's another article I got, and we'll get to that one. Okay, here we go. This is the second article from the New York Times. U.S. coronavirus death is far higher than reported, CDC data suggests. It's also an article on excess deaths. Now, we just did the one with New York City, and this is the chart with N.Y.C. And they're going back the previous 5 years, and they're showing you the explosion in deaths. So this is going back 5 years. It doesn't get any more obvious than this. It doesn't get any more obvious than that. Let's go ahead and read the article. You can see it. New Jersey, Michigan, Massachusetts, Illinois, which is not as dramatic as it is in New York or New Jersey, but you can actually still see. Look at this. You can still see it. You can see the separation. This is not normal, and these are stats over the past 5 years. Now, even the states that are not as impacted as heavily, like Maryland, who's closed off their borders to New York residents, and Colorado, which is very light, you can still see the separation. Total deaths in 7 states that have been hard hit by the coronavirus pandemic are nearly 50% higher than normal for the 5 weeks from March 8th through 2011, which is about a month. It's about the 5 weeks we're talking about, 5 or 6 weeks we're talking about. According to new death statistics from Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, that is 9,000 more deaths than were reported as of April 11th from the coronavirus. The new data is partial and most likely undercounts the recent death toll significantly, but it still illustrates how the coronavirus is causing a surge in deaths in the places it has struck, probably killing more people than the reported statistics capture. In other words, I've been telling you they've been undercounting the deaths. The increases belie arguments that the virus is only killing people who would have died anyway from other causes. Instead, the virus has brought a pattern of deaths unlike anything seen in recent years. If you look at the provisional deaths from all causes, death counts in New York, New Jersey, Michigan, Massachusetts, Illinois, Maryland, and Colorado has spiked far above their normal levels for the period. In New York City, the home of the biggest outbreak, the number of deaths is over the period is more than 3 times the normal number. Recent data shows it could have reached 6 times higher than normal. And there's the stats. Like I said, they're undercounting the dead. In fact, they're hiding the dead. There was a drone shot of them burying people out on the island by the truckload. Like I said, this is double and just look, this is triple the amount normal. This is double. They're undercounting the dead. They're not overcounting. They're undercounting the dead, which is normal, which is what you expect the government to do. They're not going to exaggerate because it looks bad on them. They're going to undercount it. In New Jersey, deaths have been 172% of the normal number so far, more than 5,000 additional deaths compared to the average count from the past 5 years. In Michigan, the partial death count is 121% of the count in a normal year, equivalent of nearly 2,000 more deaths. These numbers are preliminary because death certificates take time to be processed and collected, and complete death tallies from the Centers for Disease Control can take up to 8 weeks to become final. The speed of that data reporting varies considerably by state. In Connecticut, for example, where reported coronavirus deaths are high, the CDC statistics include 0 reported deaths from any cause since February 1st because of reporting lags. CDC collects the data. They don't make the data. We compared these provisional deaths counts with the average number of the deaths each week over the past 5 years. Public health researchers use the term excess deaths to describe a gap between recent trends and a typical level of deaths. It's difficult to know whether the differences between excess deaths and official counts of coronavirus deaths reflect the undercounting of coronavirus deaths or a surge in deaths from other causes. It's probably a mix of both. In evidence in New York and other places, the official coronavirus counts are probably too low. Tests for the illness can be hard to get. Like I'm saying, the test kits, there aren't that many because it's a new virus. And not all who die are now being tested, particularly if they die outside a hospital. In New York City recently revised its own statistics for the number of coronavirus-related fatalities, saying that thousands of additional deaths were probably because of COVID-19, even though no test had been conducted. In fact, all the numbers coming out of New York City are confirmed. They got to be tested, right? The ones that haven't been tested, the CDC doesn't count, or they're not supposed to count. There's also increasing evidence that stresses on the healthcare system and fears about catching the disease have caused some Americans to die from ailments that are typically treatable. A recent draft paper found that hospital admissions for a major type of heart attack fell by 38% in 9 major U.S. hospitals in March. In a normal year, cardiovascular disease is the country's leading cause of death. Some causes of death may actually be going down. There appear to be fewer road fatalities in California as more U.S. residents stay home, for example. It is possible that those reductions could cancel out coronavirus deaths in places where the virus is not yet widespread. But in many states, any such reductions have been clearly outweighed by increases in deaths and directly and indirectly related to the virus. Demographers often use measures of total deaths and sometimes call all-cause mortality to evaluate the effects of natural disasters where it can be difficult to trace particular causes. In Puerto Rico in 2017, only 64 deaths were initially attributed to Hurricane Maria, but analysis of additional deaths showed the way that the disaster had directly and indirectly led to nearly 3,000 deaths over 6 months. The total included the immediate deaths from mudslides and drownings, but also sepsis, diabetes, and suicides that came later as the power of failure stretched on for months. Coronavirus is clearly killing more U.S. residents directly than any hurricane has, but it is also changing lives in ways that may also contribute indirectly to increased deaths by overloading the healthcare system and discouraging people from seeking care. All right. This is, well, you can take it with a grain of salt. You can take it with a grain of salt. I'm sure people are going to take it with a grain of salt. I'm sure there's going to be some naysayers in here. But normally them naysayers come with videos and not with numbers. I'm not going to read anymore. You can take it for what it will, for what you will. This is just one more piece in the puzzle. And since everybody's not sheltering in place anymore, we'll really get to see whether this thing has any legs or not. I hope not, even though I love being right. I hope not, because wishing people's deaths, especially your fellow citizens, is not a good thing. And even as black pill as I am, that's not where I'm at. So, you know what? If I have to give an apology and say I was wrong and be castigated for, a few months because I didn't know what the fuck I was talking about, I'll take that. I'll wear that one. And I'll wear that one proudly. Because that means more people will live. And hopefully we can get back to normal. But it's not looking good for the home team. Well, anyway, with that, I'm going to jump off here. This is BGS out, and I'll see you guys on the next one.